Okay, let's talk about the interwar period. When I use the phrase interwar period, I am referring to the time between World War I and World War II. The past couple of weeks, we talked about post World War I in the US. We discussed the social unrest with the Red Scare and the Red Summer. We talked about the Roaring Twenties and the Great Depression. Throughout the 1920s and the 1930s, the US also made changes to their foreign policy. A lot of changes happening around the world led us to World War II. We see a rise of dictators in Europe and conflicts in Asia between Japan and China. During the interwar period, there are some changes in leadership in a couple countries that really lead us to World War II. The biggest change is Germany. Adolf Hitler takes power in Germany and establishes his Nazi regime. He used the economic hardships of post World War I and the hatred of the Treaty of Versailles to take power. While in prison, he wrote the book Mein Kampf, blaming Jews and the Treaty of Versailles for all of Germany's issues. This brought him fame and gave him the ability to establish a dictatorship. In Italy, Benito Mussolini used fear and force to take power. He set up a fascist dictatorship. Italy and Germany become friends. During World War I, Russia faced a civil war. This allowed Vladimir Lenin to make the rise of the Soviet Union. Following the death of Vladimir Lenin, we see Joseph Stalin take power and set up a communist government. He used fear, force, and murdered political enemies to take power. Russia is now going to be known as the Soviet Union. At first, the Soviet Union is friends with Germany, but then that changes in World War II. Japan is controlled by military leaders who have expansionist ideas. They are dead set on invading and taking over parts of China. Collective security means peaceful nations will band together to stop aggressive countries. This was the main idea of the League of Nations. Remember, this was the United States idea, but we did not join the League of Nations. The Soviet Union also did not join. Without these two big countries, the League of Nations struggled to control aggressive countries like Germany, Italy, and Japan. They failed at stopping Germany from rebuilding their army, bombing Spain, and taking back land they lost after World War I from the Treaty of Versailles. The League allowed Germany to do this, hoping it would appease them. The League also failed in stopping Japan from invading China and from stopping Italy from attacking Ethiopia. These attacks of aggression are why the United States wanted to remain isolated from this part of the world. With tensions rising in Europe and the prospect of another war coming, the US passed a series of laws to try to keep us out of the fight. In 1935, the US passed the Neutrality Acts. This was designed to show Europe and Asia that we're not taking a side and that we wanted to be out of the conflict. Under the Neutrality Acts, Americans were prohibited from traveling on ships that were at war, probably because the US got involved in World War I because of the death of Americans in unrestricted submarine warfare by Germany. The acts also didn't allow the US to sell weapons to any country at war, continuing to show our neutrality. But in their attempts to remain neutral, it is clear in the back of FDR's mind that he was on Britain's and the other peaceful European countries' sides. He allowed Americans to sell non military goods to Britain and nations opposed to aggression, but they had to come pick it up from the US. We would not ship it to them. This is significant because the US wasn't ready to oppose the bad guys yet, but they were taking steps to help out Great Britain and other allies of the US. In 1937, tensions between Japan and China hit an all-time high. Japan invaded China and began to push farther and farther inland. Although China is much bigger, Japan was far more technologically advanced and needed land and resources, so China was ideal for them. During Japan's invasion, to further destroy Chinese spirit, Japan's leaders ordered the city of Nanking to be destroyed. During this time, Japanese soldiers killed 150,000 male prisoners, 50,000 civilians, and raped an estimated 20,000 women. This event is known as the Rape of Nanking. The U.S. is still committed to staying out of conflict, so FDR delivers his quarantine speech. In this speech, he says peaceful countries must come together and quarantine and boycott these aggressive countries. Even though fighting and battles have been going on, World War II officially starts in 1939 when Germany invades Poland. France and Great Britain declare war against Germany. America still didn't get involved and hoped to remain out of it, but they prepared for it anyways with the peacetime draft. They increased spending on the Army and Navy and started to train troops. In 1940, they signed the Destroyer Base Agreement with Great Britain, which exchanged 50 of our destroyer ships for the use of some of their military bases and land. Then, in 1941, FDR signed the Lend-Lease Act, which allowed America to sell, lease, or lend war materials to any country vital to the U.S. defense. American battleships also began protecting British ships crossing the Atlantic. Even with World War II starting in 1939, the acts of aggression prior to that, the US still was not ready to join the fight, but they were clearly aiding their allies and had to know that they would be entering the fight soon. Throughout the 1930s, the US goal was to remain neutral and isolated, but that didn't last for that long. FDR knew that the war was inevitable, but he wanted to hold out as long as possible, and who could blame him? World War I was so deadly. Once America began directly shipping supplies to Great Britain in World War II, it was pretty clear which side they were on, even though we hadn't directly started fighting yet. In 1941, Japan attacked the United States base in Hawaii named Pearl Harbor. The next day, the US declared war on Japan, entering ourselves into World War II. Soon after we declared war on Japan, Italy and Germany declared war on the US. Preparing and entering World War II helped us get out of the Great Depression. We will talk more about the details of World War II later on.